Have you ever wondered what it would take for you to walk away from everything you know? Not out of fear, failure, or loss, but because of a calling so compelling, it redefines your entire purpose. In the Gospel of Mark, there's a moment that's easy to overlook, but seismic in its impact. It happens in Mark chapter 1, verse 18. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. That's it. One verse. One decision. But hidden within this simple sentence are deep spiritual truths that challenge every believer to reconsider what following Jesus really means. In this post, you'll see how this moment is not just a narrative detail. It's a theological turning point. We'll see how it ultimately points to Jesus Christ himself. At the end, you'll find two grounded biblical applications for your life today. And hey, don't miss the spiritual growth quiz linked in the description. It will help you discover what kind of follower you really are. Let's go back to the shoreline of the Sea of Galilee. Picture two brothers, Simon and Andrew. They're casting their nets. It's not just their job, it's their identity, their survival, their inheritance. Suddenly, a voice pierces the normalcy of their workday. Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. No resume, no contract, no strategic plan, just an invitation. And in verse 18, the response. And straightway, they forsook their nets and followed him. What compels a man to walk away from the very thing that defines him? Let's avoid assumptions. Let's ask, what are the irreducible truths at the heart of this verse? There is a call, there is a cost, there is a response. This is not about ministry as a profession. This isn't about choosing a religious lifestyle. It's about the essence of faith, obedience, and trust. A call that interrupts everything. The purpose of this verse isn't to glamorize sacrifice or elevate certain disciples. It's to demonstrate what authentic faith does when it hears the voice of Jesus. The word straightway means immediately, without delay. That's not just about speed. It's about priority. Jesus' call doesn't fit into our lives, it reorders them. Faith is movement, not just belief. You know, we often think of faith as something we just hold in our heads. But biblical faith always shows up in movement. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Simon and Andrew didn't know where Jesus was taking them, but the call demanded a response, and they moved. That's the principle true faith acts. The nets are more than just nets. Why does Mark tell us they left their nets? Because the nets weren't just tools. They were symbols of livelihood, security, identity, and legacy. To forsake the nets is to let go of what grounds you outside of Christ. It's not just about leaving a job. It's about detaching from the default system of self-reliance and stepping into radical dependence on Jesus. This is not poverty gospel or prosperity gospel. It's lordship gospel. Jesus doesn't negotiate with idols. He displaces them. The phone call that ends the job interview. So, imagine you're in a high-stakes job interview. Everything seems perfect. The salary, the benefits, the title. This is what you prepared for your whole life. Then your phone buzzes. It's someone you trust deeply. Maybe a parent, a mentor, or a spouse. You answer, and they say, "Get up. Leave. Come with me. I'll give you something better." Do you trust them enough to leave? That's what happened here. Jesus called and they walked out of the interview room. They left the nets, the boat, and even their father. Faith, law, and righteousness. Let's recalibrate the framework for a moment. So let's zoom out and see what this passage is actually teaching us theologically. First, faith. Biblical faith, isn't just about intellectual assent. It's this relational trust that really expresses itself in action. The disciples, they didn't follow a set of doctrines, they followed a person. Now no law required fishermen to follow rabbis. This wasn't about fulfilling tradition. It was about recognizing divine authority when they heard it. Jesus is the living fulfillment of the law, and he speaks with authority that totally transcends religious custom. And then, righteousness. Simon and Andrew weren't righteous because they had the right theology. They became righteous because they responded rightly to Jesus. Remember, Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. That's Romans chapter 4, verse 3. Same thing with these fishermen. Faith that moves is faith that saves, pointing to Jesus, the true fisher of men. This entire passage, honestly, is about Jesus. He initiates the call. He defines the mission. He becomes the center. Just as God called Abraham out of his homeland, Jesus calls these men out of their boats. And just as Moses left Egypt for a higher calling, these men leave Galilee for the kingdom. But unlike any prophet before him, Jesus isn't just speaking for God, he is God speaking. This verse points to the central truth of the gospel. Jesus doesn't invite us into religion. He invites us into himself. Okay, so here are two life-changing applications. First, audit your nets. Ask yourself, what are my nets? Is it your career, your comfort zone, maybe your need for approval? Write them down, name them, and then ask, if Jesus called me to leave this behind today, could I? This week, try taking a small symbolic step. Fast from something you lean on for identity. Let that hunger drive you to Christ. Second, follow first, understand later. The disciples didn't demand details. They followed first. You don't need a 5-year plan to say yes to Jesus. You just need trust. Obedience often comes before clarity. If you're waiting for all the facts before following Jesus, you'll never move. So make a decision this week based not on what you understand, but on what you know about who he is. So what would make you drop your nets? Mark chapter 1. Verse 18 isn't just about fishermen. It's about you. It's about that moment when Jesus calls you out of the familiar, the safe, the known, and into a walk of radical trust. It's about the power of one decision to alter eternity. So the question isn't whether Jesus is calling. He is. The question is, will you drop your nets? Want to discover what kind of follower you are? Take the spiritual growth quiz and find out your next step in the journey of faith. Click here to take the quiz. Your calling might not be to leave your job or your town, but it will always require your nets, and it will always begin with, follow me. Are you ready?